Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to our second episode on the crisis between Israel and Iran. I will not call it a war because these things don't resemble what is a war in my conventional definition, but I guess even the definition of war has changed. All these engagements are, like I said in the last episode, beyond visual range, just full of surface to surface, surface to air missiles, drones, and it's all primarily aerial engagement. So we know that Israel and Iran were exchanging a lot of fire, which started with the assassination of many Iranian nuclear scientists and IRGC generals. Then the recent developments are also something that you are all aware of, which was the US military strike on the nuclear enrichment slash holding facilities in Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing right.
Isfahan.
Isfahan. And from what the US believes, they caused great degradation of Iranian nuclear program. However, main open source intelligence reports from around the world are countering these claims. And I am not poking fun at the US military, but this is a difficult job to achieve. So you can have all the firepower in the world, but to precisely strike a facility located in the mountains to cause enough damage in the mountains and break those bunkers, and then in a very precise way attack the nuclear enrichment facilities of a country which has been predicting your attack is a very difficult job to do. So I think to the great, to the it's just a difficult job to do is what I'm saying. The Americans tried it because the Israelis have become sort of used to ordering the Americans around. Now the frustration of Donald Trump is coming out in the media. We know he used the F word in front of the media yesterday, and he said that he is very disappointed with the Israelis as well. So Jay, let's get your thoughts and then we'll discuss the situation further.
भाई क्या पागलपंती हुई है पिछले 2 हफ्ते में भाई मेरे को विश्वास ही नहीं होता है बिकॉज आई फील व्हाट आई वाज एक्सपेक्टिंग वाज अ गुड मॉर्निंग like I think this was 2 weeks ago when
Yeah.
I think you woke me up and you said that Iranian nuclear sites have been attacked and
That was 12 June.
yeah, and everyone like myself, the first thing we did was drop the W word. So a lot of people talk about the N word, but very few people talk about how much and how unsolicited and how in such an unsolicited way the W word is being thrown
What is
around
the
these
W word? World
it's
War
World
Three?
War Three,
Okay.
and the amount of times it's been thrown around is very very annoying because the कुछ भी होता है भाई सीधे वर्ल्ड वॉर 3 कुछ भी मिडिल ईस्ट में होता है वर्ल्ड वॉर 3 and we have to understand one thing that like around the time of the Second World War when there were decent types of alliances and partnerships. Right now we're living in a time where a lot of countries do not see things in such black and white as they did say in 1939. So what countries do right now is that they see a lot of profit and loss, analyze a lot of pros and cons, and most of their operations are in the geopolitical gray area, which I feel wasn't existing at the time of the Second World War. So taking all of these things into consideration, it was naive on my part and on the part of a lot of other people who thought that this might just lead to the next global conflict.
Yeah, I also think that now we live in times where basically everybody talks to everybody. You know, at the night when we thought this was really going to escalate, when people say that the B-2 bombers flew over Iran, and now people said that on behalf of Israel, United States has entered the war. Within hours or within like 24 hours of that, Donald Trump came and announced the ceasefire. Now the Americans were also very careful to say that we are targeting the nuclear program of Iran, not the state of Iran. This was, I think, said by J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States himself, in an interview that I watched. So there was clearly an intent, even on part of the Americans, to not get pulled into a war, especially on behalf of Israel. Although my understanding is from how the Israelis have been behaving, they would have liked to pull in the Americans for a longer engagement. And the fact that Donald Trump refuses to do so to his credit, you may feel what you feel about the man. He is not a warmonger, and to his credit, he does not want to be pulled into it. And I think he's the first US president who has called out Israelis so blatantly
Yeah, that's
on
true.
live television.
He has
So-
said that he's more angry with the Israelis as compared to the Iranians.
Yeah, so I mean,
respect.
there is. I don't think that the very liberal lobby around the world will give him credit for that. But he's the first US president in my lifetime, at least, who has called out Israelis so blatantly. Now, after the US brokered a ceasefire, there are some important notes to this whole thing. One of them being that, like I said, everybody is talking to everybody, right? So there are reports of the US envoy. Now, in the Trump's government, there is a position called the US Special Envoy to the Middle East. The gentleman named Steve Witkoff was holding talks even to the Iranians through probably Qatar and EU. Throughout this whole crisis, Qatar has come to be a very important player. It's quiet, it's trusted both by the Israelis and the Iranians, and of course the Americans. They have like a lot of their military assets located in these Gulf Arab countries. So, there were calls between Witkoff and the Iranian foreign minister all the way starting from like 13, 14 June, which is the second or third day of this conflict. And Iran maintained contact since. So there was a deep understanding between the Iranians and the Americans about what exactly they were going to hit, what they weren't going to hit. Even when Iranian strikes were hitting Tel Aviv, American soldiers were on the ground operating a lot of air defense systems with the Israelis. So there are a lot of like discussions that were happening, and I think that these mechanisms are put in place to to prevent any possibility of radical escalations arising from any side. So these are my takes that throughout this whole conflict there was a lot of background communication, and there was a lot of like attempt to bring it down. Gulf Arab countries naturally play an important role in that because they have started advocating a lot of peace and stability in that region. Jay, back to you.
No, I totally agree. And this somehow makes me feel that there were a lot of pointers that were drawn from Op Sindoor. It's an unpopular take, but I think there can be a lot of
There are
similarities.
to the end of
Yes.
it, because I think the night where you thought that the escalation of the military action is going to be the heaviest
Yeah.
also became the nights when the ceasefire was announced.
Ceasefire, and it was
Very
announced by Donald Trump,
abruptly, and it was always
and
brokered
you
by
know,
Donald
it's
Trump.
hilarious because everyone was saying that India took a back stand and it was under American pressure that Indians declared a ceasefire. But I think it is evident from the fact that Asim Munir going to the White House, having lunch with Donald Trump, and then also the Pakistani state nominating Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. It goes to show that where the demands and the cries for ceasefire came from. So, and even in this case, I think I don't think the Israelis wanted to stop. I think Israelis wanted to go further because Israelis are also well aware of the fact that the nuclear enrichment of the Iranians is not going to stop. And in fact, after this attack, it would make Iran even more vehement and even more determined to get a nuclear weapon. It would have the opposite effect. And I feel we don't give Barack Obama the credit that he deserves. I think the Iran nuclear deal was something that would have actually ensured prolonged peace in the region. The fact that everyone went against it was something that was quite detrimental because the Iranians, of course, did not trust the Iranians for a lot of reasons, for good reasons actually, given the continuous proxy wars that they were fighting. And on top of that, a lot of political gains were to be made by making Iran the main antagonist in the modern Israeli story. So yeah, back to you, Raj.
The math is simple. See, nowhere in the world has a external regime change or an external control over your nuclear program brought in domestic support. So, like, my point is that this Israeli fantasy, or that the people from within Iran will come and rise up against the theological state that it is right now, is rooted in very false, very untrue misconceptions. If you attack and start dropping missiles on a country to prevent a nuclear program or to cause regime change, now it's very clear that the objective was probably the latter. It will not happen because every country has a national prestige.
Absolutely.
People in India people in India might not love whoever is in power in the government of India. But hypothetically, if somebody drops a missile near Jammu or Barmer or Gujarat or someplace, people will randomly rally behind whoever is in power. That is how sovereign national pride works. Jay, back to you.
Absolutely. I mean, to give an example, that this time during the Pahalgam attacks and the eventual reaction, you have never seen the Indian establishment being so united. So that was my biggest criticism of the actions of the Pakistanis, specifically from the point of view of geopolitical sense. The fact that you gave a go ahead to this attack not only made India more united, but even ensured that, you know, I think it also greenlit a lot of actions that eventually took place inside your own territory. Now, the fact of the matter is that, like you said, Iran is a country which is not just the Islamic State. You have to understand the Islamic Republic is the newer iteration of it. It is still a civilizational state which not just looks at itself from the prism of the Islamic Revolution, which happened in 1979, but also takes great pride in its in its older history. And I would give you another example or another analogy for that. So medieval Europe, after the fall of Constantinople, was a place where people thought that, you know, a lot of theologians had power and there was absolutely no scope of improvement or no scope for, you know, reform. But there were still sections of the society which were specifically in the Greco-Roman sense, which were extremely proud of the past and were trying to revive those cultures, and eventually that led to the Renaissance. And I'm telling you that this is my personal opinion. I might be wrong, but Persians Persian society as well, a lot of intellectuals are also on that path. Now, if you take missiles, if you take ammunitions, weapons, and if you target civilian areas, if you target even military installations for that matter, it would make them rally behind the most united political force in that area. And that most united political force in that area is the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And let me tell you one more thing. Even though it is a Shia Islamic 12-er state, quote unquote, it still has a lot of ancient Iranian iconography, like their Azad Maidan, where you see the big. It's the Azad Maidan, right? Their Azad Gate, where the revolution happened, that is modeled after a Persian fire altar. Now, under Islamic sense, that is something which is haram, but the fact that it still continued after the Islamic Revolution and even after the fall of Shah is goes to show that the Iranians are not just the Shia Muslims; they're also Persians.
Yeah, that there is a very interesting fusion of the Shia Muslim and Persian identity that
Absolutely.
exists in Iran, which makes them very different from the Gulf Arab Muslims. And
Absolutely.
this is why, to project itself as the leader of the Muslim world, Iran takes up the fight for the Palestinian Muslims against Israel, because that gives them the trump card that, you know, you are in the background talking to the Israelis, you are in the background talking to the Americans, but we are here taking the fight of the Muslim world to the adversary, which is in this case Israel. And Iran obviously had its crescent or its axis of resistance, whatever it called, and before firing direct missiles at Tel Aviv, we know that Iran trained Hezbollah, Iran obviously trained Hamas, Iran trained other Palestinian resistance or terrorist groups based on your allegiance, and Iran backed a lot of proxies to take the war to Tel Aviv before it actually did that, literally. So I think that there are these axes that were taking the war to the front line of Israel, and now a lot of these have been weakened. We know that there were these pager attacks that took place and eliminated, decapitated pretty much all of Hezbollah. Gaza has been flattened, very unfortunately, from a humanitarian view, but now it can be concluded that Hamas is also very powerless, and other Palestinian Islamic jihadist groups, they have very limited capacity except for being able to fire a few rockets onto Israeli territory, which is the least of the Israelis' concerns at the moment. So we know that Iranian proxies have now been weakened. The Houthis can, you know, maybe disrupt one or two shipping lines if they can at best, but the Iranian proxies now have now been weakened. The Iranian state has received a lot of bombardment from the Israelis and the Americans. The Americans now have bombarded allegedly the nuclear facilities. So there is no good
There is
reason.
proof of
Yeah, and there
those
is so.
bombardments.
What I'm getting at is that there is no good reason to continue a longer war with the Iranians. And the real question the world needs to ask is that do we have laws and rules governing how to externally stop a country's nuclear programs? Nuclear enrichment may be done for now I'm not believing this, but it may be done for your energy security needs also. And now whether it is the real ideal method of stopping a nuclear program by bombing a country, or whether you need to appoint inspectors or have a clearer oversight of the usage of nuclear assets in a particular country. So if anybody was serious about peace, everybody had enough communication with Iran to establish this. That's why in the start, when the US Iranian talks were happening, Iranian nuclear scientists and IRGC generals were very confident in these talks that now that the talks are happening, we won't randomly be eliminated. Israel, I think, caused that breach of trust and bombarded them during those talks. That's why they were in their homes. That's why they were in public areas where Mossad agents could relay that information back home. I think it was a great escalation by Israel. I think deep down Americans are also not happy with the Israelis. They set back the peace processes between Iran and the West greatly, and they tried to drag the greatest military power in the world into its selfish war. Back to you.
And I think this is not just going to stop here, it's going to escalate in the future as well. Because now, what Iran is going to do is that now it's going to try to arm itself with a more dominant China. It's going to get a lot of weapons from China. I'm not saying that it's going to be blatant, because China has a lot of trade related economic interests with respect to the Strait of Hormuz. And keeping that in mind, China will do everything in its capacity to ensure that there is a stable Iran. And from
And they have more scientists. They have
the more
so many
scientists, exactly, and
students.
they will go help them make a nuclear bomb. And who's going to stop the Israel? Then what are you going to do? Are you going to get into like a full-fledged military confrontation again? It's not going to happen. And this is where I will call out the West again as to their blatant failure when it comes to giving out nuclear weapons, or when it comes to being hysterical with respect to who has access to such nuclear arsenal. With a state like Pakistan, which was again blatantly giving, specifically in the beginning, existential threats to India, the West played a crucial role in ensuring that they also have the bomb. So I mean, you have so many problems and so many issues with the Iranians having the bomb, but you didn't even flinch while giving Pakistan a nuclear bomb, given that Pakistan has been uh, really has been very, very detrimental to our geopolitical goals, specifically from the regional point of view. Now, another issue that I'm going to mention is that, say, if the attacks on the Kairana Hills or the nuclear facilities of Pakistan is true, or it did happen, which a lot of think tanks, a lot of experts do think that it happened. If that is true, then why striking striking Iranian nuclear facilities, not such a big deal?
Yeah.
Like, if we struck Pakistani nuclear facilities, why did the Western world react so badly and, quote unquote, ensured that there is a ceasefire as soon as possible and force the Pakistanis to go onto the negotiating table? Whereas when Israelis were doing the same thing on nuclear facilities with respect to enriched uranium, with respect to full possibilities of it, causing some types of contamination, why did the Western world not react to that situation? In fact, you had bunker buster bombs being dropped on the bully of the Middle East. So, yeah, I mean, there is this blatant hypocrisy, and I think the world notices that. The world also notices the diminishing power of the United States of America to actually do what it actually wants in the world. Because if that was true, you would have had Israelis actually listening to you. Before this, Israel used to give you orders. Now, Israel just acts, and then you have to do the dirty work for Israel to, clean up the mess that they leave behind.
Which is why I think I'm impressed with Donald Trump's calling out of them. It was a brave move. I don't think any US president has so bravely
The balls!
stood up to Israel or the IPAC, right?
The balls to do that.
Yeah. So anyway, having said that, I also want to say that Jay, I think maybe the Indian bombing of Kirana Hills, and rather the Indians and Pakistanis striking each other with ballistic missiles during Op Sindoor, alarmed the international community that much more, because both countries have weaponry,
That's a good
warhead,
point. That's a
and
good point.
delivery systems. Iran is only in the process of enriching it right now.
That's a good point.
Iran doesn't have the delivery system, so maybe the urge to bring in a ceasefire was less urgent because
Facts.
right
That's a
now,
good point.
as many ballistic missiles fell, thankfully they were all non-nuclear. So I feel like this is also a peep into how future military engagement is going to be like. Op Sindoor or these Op Midnight Hammers or True Promise. What these calls are all beyond visual range, missile, aerial, military engagement, which is an important note to us on how we need to reform our air power, our air defenses, and our capability to develop and deploy ballistic missiles. But I'm sure the Indian Ministry of Defense knows better than I do. Hopefully, we are taking notes and reforming as things pass. Now, one more thing I wanted to say was any ceasefire is as good as its implementation. India and Pakistan sometimes bothers the rest of the world lesser than the Middle East because we have our own methods, even with the Pakistanis, on how to hold ceasefires for a long time. We know that post Pulwama, during this time of our engagements in Galwan, actually, the Pakistani army didn't mobilize. Imagine that would have caused
Absolutely.
a stressful situation for us. But maybe people in our intelligence apparatus and people in the Pakistani intelligence apparatus had some kind of understanding that let us also focus on our Chinese frontier.
Yes.
So these kind of communications from the hotlines, they can actually help us avoid escalations, and we have that. And that's why many Pakistani army chiefs, the ones who are known for a stable ceasefire, sometimes are in the intelligence circles well regarded also. Fragile ceasefires are always risky. There's always like a risk of like engagements increasing. Iran and Israel are by no means on a friendly table right now. They might have agreed to a ceasefire deal, but I think as we started recording, 3 alleged Mossad agents have been executed in Iran. So
Seriously,
yeah,
they're Israelis.
yeah.
Israelis.
Yeah. So this is not in a phase where Israelis or Iranians are going to take a better view of each other. Like I said, Hezbollah, Hamas, all these organizations may have been sort of weakened right now, but they are not destroyed. If Iran can enrich uranium in its own country, it has the wherewithal and the funds to revive these organizations. It has the wherewithal and funds to start disrupting global shipping routes through the Strait of Hormuz or through the Red Sea. And now, nuclear diplomacy will be uncertain because Iran has become that much more unlikely to cooperate in the future. Because now, when it was having talks with the US, an attack was conducted, and that, in my view, I am not defending Iran, I am very critical of the Iranian regime, but that, in my view, is a simple breach of trust on the part of the Israelis, which I think deep down, even the Americans are not happy with.
Even Israelis have an idea about this because what it's going to do is that it's going to give Netanyahu a short-term political victory, and it's going to make him very popular, and it has made him very popular. But what we're ignoring is that so many ballistic missiles actually struck mainland Israel. Places like Tel Aviv and Haifa, there were some areas which were totally leveled, and this levels of destruction from missiles raining down specifically in the main areas of Israel is something that is absolutely unheard of, because the missiles that were being launched by Hezbollah and Hamas were not even close to the type of ballistic missiles that the Iranians were dropping on Israel. And mind you, Israel has a very small population as compared to Iran, so every single casualty is taken very very seriously in the country. And from what I can understand is that some 30 people died in the Iranian strikes alone
On Israel,
on
yeah.
Israel, which is a huge number
And I
according to
think
their
three
media.
after the ceasefire.
Three
was
after the
announced.
ceasefire, which is 32. So that's a lot of people. That is a lot of people for the Jewish community, which is such a small community. Because, I mean, if you just count the population, you can understand that 600 people for a I'm not taking away the pain and the grief that the families are suffering, because at the end of the day, when you're discussing warfare, there are a lot of times you're also discussing the number of dead. And with respect to a massive population like Iran, which is almost 90 million, like 600 people is nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. The 600 people might be dying like almost every month in like roadside accidents in Tehran.
Yeah.
Probably more than that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not a big deal. They will rebuild. They will vociferously pursue their nuclear bomb now. And it has really, really weakened Israel's geopolitical stance as well, and all for like small term or short term political goals, I feel.
Okay, so I'm ready to conclude, Jay. I think there are just three future implications for this. A, a ceasefire is as good as its ability to navigate the uncertainties around it. So if the ceasefire is not fragile, it will last. But look at the evidence that we have. Iran and Israel are not likely to improve their diplomatic ties or any military ties anytime soon. If Israel's provocations for Iran, if Iran's provocations for Israel continues, you will see a continuing of decapitation strikes by Israel on IRGC, on nuclear scientists. You will see Iran reviving its proxies, and it will be basically a zero-sum game. The cost will be borne by all of us because uncertainties in West Asia will reflect on oil and gas prices around the world. We know there were reports of Iranian attempts to block the Strait of Hormuz during this crisis. We know what that would have done to gas prices around the world. So there will be a chaos premium that will be paid by all of us for these conflicts. Point number two is the resultant economic uncertainties that I mentioned, with rising prices, rising inflation, and disruption of any kind of global trade that happens because of crises in West Asia. So these are two things that we need to look out for. And my final conclusion is that this is very, very far from being the end of the Iranian nuclear program. If anything, we have given them more incentive to develop their nuclear program. If anything, we have given them more evidence that nuclear armed countries like India and Pakistan are way more peaceful, because deterrence is much easier to bring around in, for example, the subcontinent. So why would people attack Iran if their nuclear warheads are ready and they have students, they have knowledge, they have the wherewithal and a decent weapons program? So if anything, this is only going to boost Iranian nuclear capabilities. It has background support of the Russians and the Chinese, and it will continue on that path.
Actually, I'll disagree
That is my
there.
conclusion.
I'll disagree there. Russians are not supporting the Iranians overtly, because Russians these days have started enjoying a lot of support from a lot of Russian Jews staying in Israel. And this is again a point that was raised by the great Shekhar Gupta. It is said that there are 1 million Israelis who speak the Russian language, and because of that cultural setup, there is a lot of good relations between the two sides, and they've cooperated on a lot of other military ventures per se. So again, like I had mentioned while we had started this conversation, we're living in times of geopolitical gray areas where there is no black, there is no white.
There
You
are
have
no
to assess
multipolarities, bipolarities.
Exactly. You have to-
Everybody is
yeah,
complex.
exactly. You have to assess the situation as to what is going to benefit you in that moment, and it's according to that you're going to take things further. And with the decimation of Iran's proxies in the Middle East, specifically Lebanon, Israel, of course, and then Syria, we're reaching a situation where that the statement that used to be made that, oh, you have to take up arms against Israel and all of that, this rhetoric is going to go down, because a lot of these countries would see what is in advantage for them. They will understand, okay, if I do this, I'm going to be in like a worse off situation. So I have to understand what is good for me, what is good for my future. And precisely this is where I feel the Israeli government, the Israeli establishment took a really bad decision, or a really, really immature decision, and very ill-advised decision when they went and attacked the Iranian nuclear program, because it only reaffirmed the Iranian stance that they have to enrich, they have to get a weapon so that a deterrence is established, not to destroy Israel, not to give it an existential threat. I disagree with that notion, but to establish deterrence, because no matter how much Pakistanis might hate us, no matter how much Pakistanis would like to destroy India, but the fact that we have a nuclear weapon is a massive deterrence to them. And likewise, no matter how much we hate the Pakistanis, no matter how much we would dislike the Pakistanis or dislike Asim Munir, but the fact that they have nuclear weapons is a deterrence, and that would make us not want to destroy them.
nuclear
vice versa.
nuclear deterrence is real.
Exactly.
And I think if a country wants to have a say in the international forums in today's day, and if it doesn't want to be run over and bombarded, look at what the implications would have been if Ukraine never gave up its nukes. The war would have ended within weeks because the world would have interfered with that much more anxiety. And that's, I think,
That's how
our
we'll conclude.
conclusion.
Thank you.
I have a
guys.
feeling that there will be many more
Yes.
episodes on this region
Hmm.
that can be concluded
Yeah.
without any
Chalo.
doubt.
सही है.
Thank you for tuning in.
Like and subscribe यार करो ना please.
Thank you.
We've got a surprise for you very soon.